So there's been a lot of chatter in the community about the new swords. Some say they're good, others have yet to farm them, and a lot more have just kind of said how bad they are. And here I am farming them out for weapon XP, confused as to how anyone can say that they aren't decent options. Now, sure, they might not be the last dagger, but out of the 33 total legendary weapons that we have right now, can you honestly say that more than 20% are strong in all content? So in today's video we'll be breaking down why I think the swords are getting a bad reputation, if they are legitimately as bad as the community believes, how best to use them, and then finish off with a couple of build ideas for you to take away and use yourselves. So as always, if that sounds good to you, what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. So let's take things from the top. The latest update introduced the new Void Vessel level, a sword pass that no one can decide if it's good or bad value, and the two brand new melee weapons of the Shadow and the Deus Ex Manus. Now each of these swords have their own identity, with the Deus Ex being more of a claymore, swinging slower but hitting harder, compared to that of the Shadow, which relies on faster, less damaging hits to get its DPS going. They're also opposites when it comes to stats, with the Deus Ex being intrinsically chill and the Shadow being toxic, which, in this game anyway, each element has a strong resistance to the other when looking at elemental resistances. And if that wasn't enough, then the Deus Ex is ready for crit modules, while the Shadow is more inclined to be ran multi-hit or consecutive attack in the case for these weapons. So right out of the gate we've got two options that fundamentally exist on opposite ends of the melee spectrum, ideally meaning that you can go for one that suits your playstyle. Or at least that's what I think Nexon were trying for, so where does this typically fall down? Well, the farming method for each of these is abysmal, to put it lightly, with 50% of the crafting is done with readily available items that most players already have in abundance. The parts blueprints can also be obtained from running the new Void Vessel level and obtaining the chest for a random part on anywhere between a 6 to a 13% chance, depending on the crater that's opened. So they're not really the worst odds in the world, especially when there's 4 of them, and also especially as running this level is very rewarding for golden catalyst parts. But the last bit needed for these weapon parts is the special materials of photon quantum crystals and ultrafine particle alloys. Now these will drop from the small and large blue light coloured boxes in the same vessel mission, requiring a new encryption key to open, which we can only obtain 6 from finishing each run. But okay, fine, 1 key for a chancer to part and 5 for the materials, what's wrong with that? Well, each of those boxes that you open is randomised for an amount of material that you'll receive, ranging from 5 at most to as little as 2, and seeing as each part needs 100 of these to craft, you're looking at anywhere between 20 boxes on a good day to 50 with the worst luck in the world. If you multiply that by 3 for each sword with the copy needed, and 5 total swords for that maxed out effect, then the amount of boxes that's going to be opened will range between 300 to 750 for one single maxed out sword, meaning that you're going to be in for the long haul of running the same Void Vessel mission between 60 to 150 times to get that maxed weapon, and then you're going to have to double that if you do want both. And that's even if you get 5 of the same box and you need in each run. So the farming is pretty dog awful. You won't be maxing these out anytime soon unless you no-life the vessel mission for hours on end. But is the weapon worth the payoff? Well, let's take a look at each one and see what we're working with. Now the Shadow's unique effect is all about its Judgment Cut style dash, providing mobility to its attacks, and as you hack and slash away you'll be building up a special resource bar which is then used for the special effect, dealing damage on the dash as well as the slashing that's afterwards. Now this can be increased both distance and damage wise by holding down that aim button, and the longer that it's held down, the more that you'll dash and the more damage that you'll deal. Now unfortunately, as the weapon has low base numbers, the effect isn't great for DPS, but it is fantastic for mobility. Now while I do think that the Shadow could benefit from a base number buff for its damage, if you're ever in the need of help mobility wise for faster clears on characters that you don't have access to, well, this weapon could be a nice and useful secondary to swap to. Now as for the Deus Ex, well, this was meant for fighting with, and the effects do complement this. On attack you'll be consuming 2% of your MP bar to deal some additional damage, as well as grant you the buffs of Liberation and Resistance. Now Liberation stacks up to 4 total times and has no time drop off, and this fuels your alternate attack, which provides 50% weapon damage per stack when it's cast, meaning that you'll get a 200% damage instance at max stacks. Now as for Resistance, this does have a duration of 3 seconds, but decreases the total incoming damage to you by 10.5%, making you a little bit tankier as you start swinging away. With the high base stats and the damage and the crit rates, this weapon is pretty capable of being used in a fight, really putting the hurt on the end of level bosses once it's built up and correctly. Now, one of the key complaints that I see for melee weapons is how they don't currently synergize very well with the current Descendant roster. Serena's 4th doesn't trigger with them, Haley or Enzo's crit rate boosting effects do nothing, even Ajax can do nothing as well, but just kind of looks cool with them, so I mean, I guess that's some kind of thing. And now on the other side, if the Deus Ex is used with a skill-based character too much, you also run the risk of losing your full MP pool, and then you become a sitting duck. If you combine this with having an ammo pool, meaning 2 resources to balance, it's kind of hard to suggest who these were made for. Now, one Descendant that can get around all of these complaints is going to be Glay, as she can trigger unlimited ammo as well as not having an MP bar for her to lose resources over. Now, this is quite a potent combination, and while I don't think it's Glay's best build by far, it is quite fun to run and absolutely can get some work done even inside of Axion. But worse still is how we can't build around these weapons, as all the modules that you'd run on a gun-based Descendant do not work with the melee weapons, or at least not in their current state. Now, Passionate Sponsor, Shot Focus and Walker Tightrope, just to name a few, do not actually work or do anything for these melee weapons. Now, as a positive boost though, they did amend the arcade tuning tree so that we get some tasty buffs, especially in the consecutive hits department being additive boosts for grabbing the node. So that's a lot of negative factors that we've covered, but there is one huge redeeming quality that the swords boast, with the Deus Ex even being able to one-shot end-of-level bosses inside of Axiom Plains, a quality that not many creators that I've seen seem to have shared out to the community. Now, in the weapons item card, you can actually scroll down and locate a huge 4x multiplier underneath the consecutive attack damage stat, telling us what each sword is designed for. Now, in the case of the Shadow, we'll get a 4x against Legion of Immortality champions, which you'll typically run into when alarms are sounded in the new Void Vessel, meaning that any yellow bar enemy that you see in that level is going to take all the damage that you would normally be dealing and then crank it up by 4 times as much. That's a pretty huge damage increase and would explain why the weapon can feel weak against anything else to be able to balance it. Now, this is nothing compared to the Deus Ex, as while the weapon can handle itself pretty well as standard when built up thanks to the 10x crit damage multiplier that we've got in this build and high base stats, its special 4x multiplier goes towards some of the tankiest end level bosses that we've seen so far, being Legion of Breach commanders. Now, this means that if you are planning on farming Axion for drops or XP, you can run this as a secondary on any Descendant, even ones that were fantastic at mobbing but had 0 ways of being able to deal with that end boss, and you can go and one-tap them like they never existed with a 4x, pushing your crit multiplier from something that feels like a 10x into that of a 40x. That's pretty huge, and it does kind of help out those mobbing Descendants that are still missing that bossing damage to make their runs much faster. And while these are kind of niche upsides, they do make them a very potent backup option in the right scenarios, and I'll absolutely be keeping the Deus Ex in my back pocket anytime that I go to farm in Axion. So now that we've covered what makes the sword strong, let's talk builds quickly so you can get the most out of each one. And starting with the Shadow, I am a bit short of the new mods for this one, but you will ideally be building strong into attack speed, damage, toxic attack, and consecutive attacks. Now, this is the build that I currently rock, with the 4 missing mods that you're going to want to slot in once you do have them. Unfortunately, I'm still farming, are going to be double edge extension, poison priority, 1-point breakthrough, and with the last being either a small stat bump, being able to go into more rounds with expand impact mag, or maybe even a little bit more range with grip augmentation at the cost of some base damage. Now, as for our cores though, we are going to go for full damage here, going it full into weapon attack for our orange core, toxic attack for our blue, and 2 consecutive attack damage rolls and 1 attack chance for our 3 red cores. Now, for the sub-rolls, we'll once again lean heavily into what the weapon is already made for, with toxic attack, weapon attack, consecutive attack chance, as well as damage, and then that allows us to be able to have stats that run something very similar to here. And as you can see, we are over the 100% threshold when it comes to consecutive attack, which means that we have a chance of being able to go once again into this multiplier before we then go into the 4x when it comes to Legion of Immortality champions. Now, swapping on over to the Deus Ex, we run this slightly different as we do have access to the crit damage modules for heavy DPS. So this is going to be the build that we're going for, gives us a faster swing speed, more range, increases to our base and chill attack, and then lastly all the crit buffs that we could ask for. Now, one thing I would recommend here though is that if you do manage to get the right mods for it, I would recommend swapping out Refrigerated Edge for that of Chill Priority if you get it to drop, as Edge currently hurts our swing speed, which does affect our overall DPS. Now, going on to the cores, we will actually want to go for weapon attack for our orange, chill attack for our blue, and then full crit damage rolls on our 3 reds, as we can get to 88.65% crit rate with our modules, and taking advantage of those high base figures that the weapon does drop with. Now as for the sub-rolls, it makes sense for us to lean more into the Axion killer that it is, with a roll into weapon attack, chill attack, and crit damage. And then for the last roll though, instead of running more crit rate, which would kind of work out to be roughly just over 5% more crit rate and become a little bit more consistent, instead I've opted for more weapon attack, giving us a huge bonus against Legion of Breach. Now you could go for the rate if you do prefer the most consistency and you do plan on using it pretty much everywhere, but personally I think it's all about the damage with this one, and the 88.65% is more than usable. And with all that out of the way, that wraps it up for the talk about the swords. Honestly, I don't get the hate what the community has for these. Now, sure, they aren't as versatile as typical weapons, but once you realise what these were intended for, they smack hard and they do the job that they were made for. I do think that the farming method is abysmal, though. That farm is taking way too long for what these actually are, so hopefully we'll see Nexon do something about this fairly shortly. And so this is a section I want to hear from you. What are your current thoughts on the swords that we have access to? Do you have high hopes for the next one to drop? And then lastly, what are your current thoughts on Season 3 so far? Let me know all that and more down below. Massive thank you for making your way to the end of the video. As I always say, keep yourself safe, keep yourselves well, and I'll see you all on our next video.